So, kind of wanted a fedora for this review. Should have had one for all my Indiana Jones reviews. Oh well. So Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was directed by James Mangold and once again features Harrison Ford returning as Indiana Jones and also features likes of Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Mads Mikkelsen, Antonio Banderas, and this time around taking place in the 1960s, Indiana Jones runs into his goddaughter played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge and they learn about this artifact that can actually do harmful things, and this former Nazi played by Mads Mikkelsen is trying to get to it, and he's trying to change the course of history, and they have to stop him. So Indiana Jones is a franchise that I've kind of like grown up, not necessarily grown up with, but like grown accustomed to, and I've actually really appreciated them over the years. May not have liked it when I was a kid, but I definitely really like them now as an adult. And when I heard there was going to be another Indiana Jones movie, I was like, oh, why? Why are we doing this again? Like, it just doesn't sound like a good idea. After Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, this just doesn't seem like a good idea. I was kind of intrigued with this movie because James Mangold was directing it, and he's directed several movies in his career that are really good, like Logan, Walk the Line, Identity, Ford v Ferrari. It's like, okay, let's see what James Mangold can do with this, because he can pretty much do any kind of movie out there. And the trailers I thought were decent enough, and normally, in my opinion, the odd number Indiana Jones movies are usually better in the franchise. Like, I love Raiders of the Lost Ark, I love Last Crusade, I like Temple of Doom, and I don't really like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I was hoping this one would be one of the better ones of the franchise. And admittedly, I don't love this movie. I don't hate it by any means. I feel like I feel like I'm gonna rip this movie apart, but honestly, I don't hate this movie that much. There's just a lot of things about this movie that I kind of just don't like in retrospect. So, what do I like in this movie? Well, Harrison Ford is really good in this movie too. Like, I've read this is one of his favorite characters, and I think he does a really good job with this role, and I think he brings a lot more of the human side to Indiana Jones than he did in Last Crusade. I do think it is really fascinating what they do with this character. I do think there are a lot of interesting themes in this movie too about, you know, about how we kind of like grow older and maybe people kind of like go away and like kind of like, what do we do when those people disappear and such. But then again, I'm also kind of thinking, didn't James Mangold do this earlier with Logan? Maybe I didn't like that in retrospect, but I do think there are interesting ideas in this movie. And kind of like with Indiana Jones, there are some great sequences in this movie. There's this parade that I thought was a lot of fun. The car chase that's admittedly pretty fun, and there's like a lot of really great moments where not only Harrison Ford gets involved in the action, but even Phoebe Waller-Bridge gets involved in the action. I thought that was really cool. The opening scene is pretty fun, minus the de-aging of Harrison Ford. It definitely, I wouldn't say distracted from the scene, but it's still a fun scene overall, a fun 20-minute scene at least. So that it has that going for it. And despite its tone of the movie, which is like a little more depressing than some of the other Indiana Jones movies, there's still some fun here, and there's moments where it is really funny throughout. Like the opening scene again is pretty funny. There are lines and quips thrown here and there that are pretty funny. And I do really like the production values of this movie, particularly the production design. I think that's really fascinating. I really felt like Indiana Jones was actually there in the 60s, where I felt like he wasn't really there in the 1950s during Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But I also really like the cinematography. I think this is one of the better shot Indiana Jones movies, where it's like, that is a great shot right there. I'm really impressed by what they did there. Done by Phelan and Papa Michael, has done a lot of James Mangold's movies. And also, I really like John Williams' score in this movie. You can't do an Indiana Jones movie without Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and John Williams. That's like the quartet right there, like the people who really need to be there for Indiana Jones to work. And his score is great here. It's definitely has a lot of callbacks to some of the other movies. It definitely kind of like is its own thing, and I do think it's really mature, and I do think it's really well done in this movie. And admittedly, going back to the callbacks to the original movie, there are plenty of them, but they don't overstay their welcome. They're just kind of like little lines here and there, and maybe just like a visual clue where it's like, okay, that's from this movie. And it's not like, again, going back to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, like when they just panned over to the Ark of the Covenant, it's not like that at all. It's actually, meaningful. It's actually really well done, and it's actually like really great when I hear those callbacks, and like when I see those callbacks, it's like, okay, that's actually really good. You do have some respect for this franchise with this movie, but let's talk about the disrespect. This movie kind of disrespects Indiana Jones a bit. Now, I'm not one of those guys who whenever a new movie from an old franchise comes out and they kind of change a lot of things with the characters, I am not one of those people who's like, you have to have the characters a certain way, you have to have the characters in a specific way, or else it's just not going to work at all. I'm not one of those people, but with the disrespect for Indiana Jones in this movie may be a bit too much, and most of it does come from Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And I'm like, come on, like, what are you doing? Meanwhile, Sala is also disappointingly used in this movie. Like, he has a few good scenes in this movie, but there's so far and few in between that it's like he might as well not even been in this movie. I didn't really like what I kind of like what they had him for in this movie, but at the same time, it's like you could have used him a lot more. Meanwhile, let's talk about Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Now, I do think she's talented. I do think she can be really funny. I do think she is likable enough, but her character is kind of. I just didn't understand like what she did half the time. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, it just makes no sense. Like, why would you do this? Admittedly, she does have a few moments here and there, like one in the ending, one in the middle of the movie where she tries to escape. It's like, okay, that was actually a really clever thing that you did. But there are times where I'm like, why are you doing this? Why did you do this? And the characterization of the movie, characters in this movie, is not that great. Particularly with, again, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. It's like, I don't know what her character deal is. Like, I don't really know, like, why she's doing the things that she does. It just kind of is annoying to me, and I don't know why they're doing it. Mads Mikkelsen is also in this movie. He's a great actor, and he has played great villains, but he is kind of just a one-note villain in this movie. He does have a few good scenes, like in this one scene where he's, like, trying to encourage this, this hotel staff member to basically kind of like help him, and it's actually kind of creepy and actually is his best scene in the entire movie, but it just reminded me too much of his other roles, like in Hannibal, or even, it wasn't as bad as his villain in Doctor Strange or his turn as Grindelwald in Fantastic Beasts, but it was just kind of underwhelming still. Also, I didn't really understand, also Indiana Jones has these friends played by Antonio Banderas and Toby Jones that we had never heard of, we had never seen, and you were supposed to believe that they've been friends for years and years and years. Maybe they could have met him, but, you didn't mention anything about it until that moment. It's like, okay, these are just your friends? Okay. Would have liked to have met them beforehand, but alright. I just felt like they could have used that to, actually, develop their friendship a lot more and actually been Indiana Jones has a lot more friends outside of, he has a lot more friends than we realize. And it's just kind of weird. It's like you just have these random people just come in and for a few scenes, it's like, okay, fine. Their performances are fine, but there's not a whole lot there. Meanwhile, the CGI is pretty bad too in this movie. Now, I'm not asking the actors to, put their bodies through, all this, crazy stuff just to get a good shot or anything. But the CGI does look terrible at times. Some of the characters, when they're hit, they kind of, it looks bad. It looks computer generated. I think one guy just falls over and it just it looks ridiculous. It looks embarrassing. And it just felt like it didn't work. Also, I didn't really care for the pacing of this movie. Now, the majority of the Indiana Jones movies, if I'm correct, are at least 2 hours long. This movie's 2.5 hours long, and you can definitely feel that at times. I don't know why this movie needed to be 2.5 hours long. I would have been fine with a 2-hour Indiana Jones movie. I was fine with at least 3 of them. Meanwhile, the ending. Oh, I'm not going to spoil the ending. But there are so many moments in the ending, and particularly the third act, where I'm like, okay, are you sure this is a good idea? There are so many moments where it's like, this is nuking the fridge again, isn't it? This is the moment where it's like, do you really want to do this? Do you really think this is a good idea? Yeah, you do this. You're doing this. You're really going for it. And they do allude to it, but it's ridiculous. It's, okay, maybe not as ridiculous as the stuff in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but close to it. Pretty close to it. But overall, this is not a terrible movie by any means, and not even the worst Indiana Jones movie. Harrison Ford's really good in the movie. There are a few great sequences here and there. It can be fun. It can be funny. There are great production values throughout this movie, and the callbacks to the original movies are pretty great as well. And I do think there are a lot of interesting themes that it does address. But I don't really like some of the characters, particularly Mads Mikkelsen or Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I didn't like the use of Sala in this movie. The CGI is bad. The pacing's off. The disrespect for a lot of the characters just doesn't really make sense. And the ending, pretty much everything about the last act is just very questionable. And I'm like, why? Just why? So I'll give Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny 2.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. It's a fun enough time, but if you love the original trilogy and you didn't really care for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, you probably won't enjoy this. If you enjoyed every single Indiana Jones movie beforehand, you'll probably enjoy this. And if you don't like any of them, then don't even bother because you're not gonna like it. So that's basically the best thing I can say about it. It's like you kind of already know what you feel about it based on the other movies. So how would you rank all 5 Indiana Jones movies? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.